Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. And I'm delighted to welcome my guest today, who is Maureen St. Germain. Hello, Maureen.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
Well, it's a lovely book that you have written. It's called Mastering Your 5D Self: Tools to Create a New Reality. And there we are,
Okay.
matching pen.
Very good.
So I guess maybe tell us a little bit because this book is is channeled, isn't it? So what what
It's a fun thing. Yeah, it isn't exactly channeled, but you're right. I am inspired by my guides, and then they just tell me what to say, but I don't necessarily, there are lots of places where I'm actually quoting them, but there's lots of places that I'm not. Yeah.
so I guess there's a fine distinction between channeling and tuning in and getting what they're saying. I think is what you're so I was using that just in the context of this book was given to you, so to speak.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
it's
Mhm.
it's the teachings that have been shared with you by your guides.
That is correct.
So, have you always had this ability? How did you develop this ability to communicate with your guides?
I think I came in awake because from the time I was a child, I remember that I was being watched. And I also remember that I had a certain conviction and passion that a lot of kids didn't have. And so I wasn't afraid to speak my mind. And I think that that has a little bit to do with being guided, very strongly guided. And and when I think about some of the things that happened when when I was a teenager, there were times that I would just say stuff and people would just be, wow, how does she know that? And I have to tell you a funny story. As a 6-year-old or 5-year-old in kindergarten, the kindergarten teacher asked me, and you have to understand the environment I grew up in was a farm. So there was just farmland around us. It wasn't like there were neighbors. There were neighbors across the street, but we didn't really socialize with them. So we just, I was one of 5 kids growing up. And we just had each other. We didn't have, city stuff that a lot of kids grow up in. And so I'm in this preschool of some sort, and the teacher actually asks me, she calls me up to her desk and she asks me what my phone number is. I don't know it. And then she asked me, where do you live? And I looked at her and said, why are you asking me these questions when I can see perfectly well you've got the answer in front of you? So there was part of me that knew what people knew, and I'm like being this little princess in that moment. Now, trust me, I was not a spoiled child because I was one of so many, So um, I think I came in with the ability, and then what I did for my own personal benefit is I spent a lot of years developing my self-awareness. I spent time on self-growth, self-introspection. I'm still doing it. There was an incident that happened to me a couple of weeks ago, and I was telling my husband, um, I really didn't like what happened. And then I started asking myself, what did I do to attract this? You know, and of course he said, that's a really good question to ask, so and of course, if we see the same patterns that we have seen before, maybe we're getting it, but we haven't gotten all the way gotten it. So and I was fortunate. My parents were both plugged in. Um, my mom was very psychic. She knew where my father was as a prisoner of war in Germany. Um, and my parents both went to a training. Um, Gosh, I can't think of the name now, but by a well-known uh, spiritual teacher at the time. Um, who taught you how to see into the body and things like that. And so there were many experiences that I had, they were very allowing and accepting. Um, at the same time, my father did tell me, don't tell everybody what you're getting because they won't understand. So I was
Well,
very fortunate in that way that it was really okay.
yes, indeed, you were very fortunate. I just want to take you back to when you said that you always had a sense of being watched. Some people might find that somewhat unnerving. So, what do you mean by that?
Well, I knew that there were other beings. I didn't understand, as a child, I didn't think about ETs per se, but I knew that there were, I'll call it, beings beyond the veil that could observe me. I felt that some were benevolent and some were not, but I wasn't frightened. I understood that that was um, part of the deal. And it's kind of interesting because I didn't get exposed to TV. The only thing we ever watched was 60 Minutes, and that was Sunday night. That was it. So a lot of kids watch cartoons or movies, but I didn't get any of that. So I really did live a very narrow band, and this leads me to conclude that my knowing was internal. You see, you know. But I was aware that I was being watched and I wasn't afraid. It wasn't like that. But besides, I knew the good guys were watching me as well.
Now,
So, yeah.
your your title has the word 5D in it. And so this is a word that is often heard these days, but not everyone knows what it means. So
Okay.
could you explain that?
Well, first of all, I'd like to offer that this is the second of 3 books written about 5D. And I was told by my guides that this whole idea of 5D was very important. And this goes back over 10 years ago. I started writing the first 5D book, Waking Up in 5D. That book, gosh, back in maybe 2012. And then it took like 7 years before it was really ready. And I remember at that time, I was like the only one out there saying these things. So fifth dimension is a concept. It's a data set, which means third dimension is where you and I are at, and it's where we carry our awareness into action. We're living and interacting with others as well as, plants and animals and all of that. That's all 3D. It also contains the concept of polarity, good and evil, right and wrong. Fourth dimension is a place of transition. So I'm not at all even though I like to follow science and use science to prove a lot of the things that I talk about. In this case, science will tell you that it's time, and it's not time. Time is a construct, and fourth dimension is a portal. And the joke is you would not go to one of your train stations to spend the night. You might get stuck there, but you wouldn't do it on purpose. You wouldn't go to the airport to spend the night. You might get stuck, but you wouldn't intend, because there's no arrangement for that. It's always a portal, a way to get from point A to point B. So when I start to put it in these terms, people begin to understand, oh, now I get it. So this energy of fourth dimension is high vibe. It involves a lot of movement. And then that slides you into fifth dimension. And for those of you who are musicians, one of the ways to kind of really bring an understanding is to think of the major chord 135, and I'll sing it for you. I'm not that great of a singer, but I want people to be able to hear it. When we sing, like from the Sound of Music, the Do Re Mi song, this would be 1 3 5 3 1, and then 1 3 4 4 4 wants to go down to third, 4 4 4 goes up to fifth, and fifth goes to the octave. So 5 is this place of unconditional love, and it has the capacity then for expansion. Because one of the things that I have discovered is that fifth dimension is the vibration of what everyone else thinks is heaven. That would be the equivalent. Okay. And it's a vibrational data set. So it looks like here. It looks just like here. You can't visually know that you're in fifth dimension unless certain things happen, but you could still be in fifth dimension. So in fifth dimension, you can participate in third dimension. You can participate in fourth dimension. But when you're in third, you cannot participate in fifth. So it's a little bit like those nesting dolls that from the inside, you can look out, you can look within rather, but you can't look without. So you have to be at the fifth layer in order to see down to the third layer. And we do these sort of things all the time. There's so much information that has come through my guides to help people understand. And I think that's the thing that I like to bring to the table is that I take complex issues and I help people put them in everyday terms so that they can, oh, now I get it. So all of our urgency to go to heaven when we pass can be redirected because we are creating heaven on earth.
So does that mean, I think, sorry, I'm just trying to think of how to phrase this question because I've had a few questions all at once in my mind. But I guess the question that first cropped up was, can we experience all dimensions at once?
Yes, we already are. So cause and effect is second dimension. Third dimension is the screen of life where we play everything out, and we can be both the player and the observer. And we've all done this where we've been in an environment, but then we kind of jump out of our body and kind of watch what's going on. From fifth, you certainly can participate in all the other dimensions. And because you have this vibration that allows for participation. Now, what's interesting is as people become more evolved, they become less inclined to experience the lowered vibrations. And the lower vibrations aren't bad or wrong. They're simply the difference between being a kindergartner and being a college student. There's no right or wrong. It's simply a stage of development that we move through. So we want to be because once we get into fifth dimension, there is no judgment. There's comparison, there's contrast, there's choice, but there's no judgment. And right now we're so used to choice and judgment being lined up together. We don't say the reason I don't wear red on camera is because I look bad. Red's not bad, but maybe I think I look bad. So then there's a judgment there. But if I just say, I just prefer a softer color, it changes the vibe. And it's the same kind of information, but it is elevated. And that's what we're doing. We're learning to elevate our experiences and our expressions. And it also needs to be understood that we collectively agreed to go into an environment that did have polarity. It is my understanding from the guides that even Source itself did not anticipate man's inhumanity to man. And we can see that around us, and we can pray for others to elevate up. In fact, one of the meditations that I have is called Divine Government, and it's praying for the highest good of all the leaders, whether they're your boss at work or the head of your country. And the idea is that they would bring in more of their divine self, so it would be harder for them to behave badly. It's a very interesting concept. But what it does is it gives us something to do. When something happens that we disapprove of, rather than judge it or label it or trash talk it, we could actually pray that it improves. And it would be no different than if you were a parent and your child behaves badly. You don't tell all the neighbors how bad your kid was. You work on teaching the kid how to be better. So why are we not doing that at every level?
So we can be in all dimensions simultaneously. Does that mean that this is really about a state of mind?
Yes and no. It isn't just state of mind. It is a vibrational data set. So your capacity to be tuned to fifth dimension is incumbent upon your mastery and your willingness to stay out of judgment, let's say. So it's a little bit like a radio. We have the capacity, but do we use it? And you can't use it if you don't have power. And like that. So the radio is a great example because you need power, but you need the ability to tune to a particular vibration.
So if we're thinking about this, and I asked that state of mind question very, very deliberately because I want everyone to have a very clear idea of what we are talking about. So this is about choosing to look at things in a much more neutral way. So when we're talking about non-judgment, it's about neutrality. And obviously, what gets in the way of that is our emotions, because we're always judging whether something is pleasant, unpleasant, dangerous, not dangerous. And I think that that's very much linked with the survival mechanism, but also with the predisposition that we have whilst living in this physical world to seek pleasure rather than pain. So,
Well, the thing is, and I'd like to go back to this idea of neutrality. I don't see 5D, especially at the lowest levels of 5D, as a place where there's neutrality. What I see is the ability to see both sides. That's different than being completely neutral. Because to me, neutrality implies a fence sitter, or someone who has no opinion. And in 5D, you could see the merits of either side, and then you choose. The thing that happens in 5D that's different from the other lower dimensions is in 5D, the choice to do the not God thing doesn't exist. And I'm deliberately saying not God rather than good or bad, because if you're God and someone knocks on your door and you let them in because they're your neighbor and you have them sit down, you're going to offer them a glass of water or tea or coffee or something. That is a natural outpicturing of what we do in the West. So that's a God choice. We wouldn't look at them and say, what are you doing here? You can't come over here at this hour. You see what I mean? You see the difference? And so what happens is in 5D, you see choices, but the choices are all pleasing. So it goes back to your pleasure idea. So all choices are pleasing. So that isn't necessarily neutral, if that makes sense. What we're not going to see is the polarity of good and evil or right and wrong. Those are going to pass away. But certainly we could see that lemons are sour and sugar is sweet, or that night is dark and day is light. Those things will continue to be available to us, especially as we move higher into higher realms. And the lowest level of 5D is perfection as we know it. And you and I can think of what we think perfection is. But at the end of the day, maybe there's a higher version of that we haven't thought of yet because of our own limitations. So it is true that because we've been in such a challenging cycle of survival, as you have named, and our concern for the welfare of other humans, that we struggle to comprehend how could there be a 5D? And the answer is the same way we think about heaven. We know that most organizations that teach spirituality or even the religions, they all talk about heaven. And so that's where we're headed to, and we won't have to die to get there. It is going to happen. And it's a form of tolerance, because I might be in the store with you and we're shopping for clothes, and maybe I'm looking for a top, and I show it to you and I go, I love this style, but it's the wrong color for me. And you go, well, it's perfect for me. I'll take it. So it's like that. We have interest, we have concepts that we're able to observe in others. So yeah, it's one of the ways I describe it is a different game. In America we have football, and in Europe, football is what Americans call soccer. So it's a little bit like that. The American football is really rough, and it probably get phased out over time because it's just too physically demanding and has caused too many injuries. But soccer's awesome, and the games are similar, but they're different. And this is why when people slide into 5D, they don't know they're there, and then they slide back into 3D. And a classic example that I describe in the first book is this whole idea that when something disappears, your favorite crystal, your car keys, your sunglasses, and you can't find them. And then, you look in the place you always put them and they're not there. And then you finally get the spare. So then you go out, you finish that errand, and you come back and you go to put the item away, maybe your sunglasses, and you go to put them away in the same place that they always live. And there's the original pair that you couldn't find. And it's the vibrational data set. When you're anxious and concerned, I wonder what I did with these. I wonder where they've gone. That anxiousness pulls you into polarity. Somebody took them. Whereas in 5D, after you've completed your little errand, you're feeling comfortable, you're in a joy spot. Why couldn't you see them before? Is because when you came back the first time, you thought you were done and you were in your joy place, put them down, and that's 5D. So this has happened to so many people. Has it ever happened to you where you go back to the same place and it's there and you looked like 5 times before and it wasn't there?
No, I have other experiences where they reappear in places where it was impossible not to have been seen. Maybe a month later, like for instance, on top of the bed, and it's like 2 months later, and the bed's been made and laundry's been all the rest of it. So it's just appeared there. And I think, okay. All right, somebody's having a laugh. Yes.
Well, some of that might be elementals if
Yeah.
it's completely moved. But I have a lot of stories from people where they have, found, like, I had a friend who had a beautiful emerald ring and she threw it in the drawer after being out one night, not wanting it to sit on the dresser. It was a family heirloom. And the next day she thought, I better put that away properly. Couldn't find it. Every time she went looking for it, it was not there. And she was sure that she came in and put it in that drawer. So she finally said to herself, okay, I'm just going to have to accept the fact that I've lost this family heirloom and it's gone. And the very next time she opened that drawer, it was right there on top. And so when I started asking my guides, what's going on? And this is one of the keys, is to ask what is going on. Because when we ask the other 5 interview questions, who, when, where, and how, what we are asking is for information to solve an issue. So when we ask for the what question, it's completely open-ended. And in the early days, when my stuff would disappear, I would say, where did it go? How did it disappear? And I would always be told, well, it's in a higher dimension. But one day, because I'd been teaching my students to ask the what question, because that's what my guidance had been showing me, out of my mouth came the idea of what's going on. And I was immediately told, Maureen, you were in a higher dimension when you put it down. And I went, whoa. So the what question is pivotal to help you stay in 5D. Because when you keep asking what is going on, what happens is you get information that you hadn't anticipated. I thought that when my stuff disappeared and I was told it was in a different dimension, I thought it was like, well, we're sending my stuff ahead so I can experiment, and have an anchor there, like monkeys in space. Not true. Not true. So we're the ones that are putting it down. We're the ones that are putting it there. And so you could ask, now that you have some history of things being placed, what's going on? And you might get shown the elementals that are moving it, or you might get shown that another version you in another timeline put it there. And that gets really interesting because these are ideas that you and I would not think of. And that's the really powerful tool that asking the what question gives us, is the ability to know something that we would not have conjured up in our brains. As creative as you might be, as creative as I might be, some of this stuff, I just, I had my own idea on how that was happening, and I obviously was wrong. But then the guides came in and said what was really happening. So that's a really powerful tool to ask what's going on, or I wonder what's going on, and then let that answer float in.
That's brilliant. It's I've actually seen a pendant disappear before my very eyes, so that I dropped it and it never hit the ground. And to this day, I still don't know exactly what happened. I
Did
just
it
know
reappear?
it has yet to reappear. But I saw it. I saw it because I dropped it, and as I dropped it, it never hit the ground.
Wow.
And thinking that I was losing my mind, I looked everywhere on that floor. I got my partner to look at both, so it's two pairs of eyes, nobody. And so I knew that what I had seen was true. It literally vanished before my
So then
eyes.
you can ask, what's going on? What was
I
going
will.
on at the time? Mhm. And this is very interesting. Even if you're not a meditator, even if you don't feel like you're intuitive, when you start asking the what question, answers will come. They might not come right away. You might be stirring a soup and the answer will float in because you're kind of doing something mundane and your mind is available. So we don't work it. We simply ask the question, what's going on? I really want to know what's going on. And you might ask more than once, but you don't, like, oh, I got to know kind of a thing.
Well,
Very.
that's a lot of fun, actually. It's a
Mhm.
So what do you feel, excuse me, what do you feel in listening to your guides um, really stands out for you as being hugely important for us to know? Because I know that all of it is important, but what is it that really kind of hits you?
Um, the thing that hits me the most is that we are collectively creating the version of the future we want. And there are multiple timelines, multiple versions of us moving forward. And when we focus on what we don't want, because we're scared or worried, we're going to get more of that. And even though this sounds like basic manifestation, what we need to remind ourselves of is, because the veils are thinner, because we're moving into these finer, finely tuned dimensions, what we think is manifesting faster than it used to. And whenever you catch yourself thinking what I will call a dark thought, to immediately follow it with a positive so that you remain in balance. You see, you can still have polarity ideas, polarity experiences. Like I had an agency that I had hired, and we were very disappointed in the outcome, but they did one thing that was so phenomenal. And so after I was listing the good things that happened that year and then the not so good things, and I was listing that experience as something that I wanted to let go. But in contrast, I also wanted to claim this really good part of it. And so that's part of what we're doing. And how do we acquire these skills? And there's a number of ways one of which is to announce, I am waking up in 5D. I'm waking up in 5D when you go to bed. And that sets the stage. And so even when you wake up and you're feeling kind of groggy or grumpy, then you shift because you announced, I'm waking up in 5D. So you set the stage. And I always like to give people some very powerful tools to shortcuts to get where they want to go. So one of them is a sunset. And if you've ever watched a sunset, it's very, what's the word I want? Uplifting. And we feel good looking at this beauty. If you make a habit of watching the sunset or the sunrise, whatever, whatever is available to you, what happens is psychologically, you cannot be depressed because psychologically, your mind knows there's going to be another one tomorrow. So even if you're feeling down or you're depressed, looking at the sunrise or the sunset is a very powerful way to heal. And I went through a tough time where I was very depressed. And I asked my guides, what could I do that would help me pull out of it? And that's what they told me to go do. And then a few years later, I found that there was scientific research that supported that notion that for therapies, patients have been told to go do this, and it pulls them out of their depressions. And then another time when I was really upset about something, and I hope you will laugh about this, I was really upset, really mad, and I said, I need to get out of this funk, but don't make me do anything hard. Okay. And so they said, okay, ask God or source, whatever you would call it, to show you how much you are loved. And what happens is your kids come to you and say, Mommy, I love you. Or a friend calls and says, I just want you to know I've been thinking about you all day and I'm just so grateful we're friends. So you start to get feedback and you know how much you're loved. It's amazing. It's a simple little statement.
It is, and interestingly, I've been, I I did some work on myself last year, and it was about the ability to opening up to receive love.
Mhm.
So because I recognize that with many of my clients, the issue is not inability to give love, but it's inability to receive love because of the matters of self-worth. And so I thought, maybe I need to do some work around this myself. And it's very, very interesting because I experienced exactly what you are recounting. Is suddenly there was people were very open about their appreciation of what I do and what I do for them. And it was a very interesting experience. And it especially because it wasn't directly what I asked for. I asked to be open to receiving it. And maybe that means noticing it when it comes. Maybe.
Oh,
Or
for
maybe,
sure. For
yes.
sure. That's brilliant because one of my students call it your internal BS meter. And if all you've ever heard is negative, you can't do anything, you're never going to amount to anything, that kind of stuff, then I'll call it at the front desk of your internal consciousness, it's going to, anytime somebody says something like that, okay, that's a match, come on back. And anything that's very positive, we don't know what you're talking about. Get out of here. And so it's this dismissive. So yeah, that's really powerful and it's very well said. Very well said.
Well,
Um,
things
yeah.
that I ask my clients to do when I'm working on this with them is every day to make a note of something positive that somebody has said about them. Because what I'm wanting to do is to train them to actually notice when people say positive things, because there's that whole thing of when people receive compliments, of dismissing them, just being nice, somebody's just being kind, not being, or not noticing it at all. So that's a little exercise that I give my clients to do, is to really pay attention, so that there's something that somebody says that's positive about them every day. So I think this is really, it's very powerful.
It's very powerful. And in the book that I wrote called Beyond the Flower of Life, I actually put in chapter 2 an exercise called the I Love You exercise. And this is very interesting because what it describes is what you've said, and you list all the positive things that people have said to you. Okay. And then part 2 of the same exercise is you list some of the negative talk that you have heard, and then you rewrite it. And you'd use 2 important phrases. You say, in the past, blah, blah, blah happened, but today I can see blah, blah, blah. So the but is the great takeaway. People don't realize, oh, she's so pretty. Too bad she's so fat, but she's so fat. I don't know, that kind of thing. Now, so let's say, I'll pick something relatively benign. A mom didn't like the way her daughter dressed, but she didn't want to tell her not to change her clothes, but she wanted to express her disapproval. You're going out like that. So in the past, I used to criticize how you dressed, but today I can see how well dressed you are, and I am so proud of you. Now, here's what happens is it takes all those negative statements. Okay, come on back. We recognize you. And then it gives it a reframe and changes it. And what happens is exactly what you just said. The ability to receive shifts.
It's crucial, actually, this change of perspective. Again, just working with a client at the weekend, uh, because I'm an analytical hypnotherapist, and she went back to an incident in which she was being very cruelly teased by some boys, and we just flipped it around, so that she was able to say what she felt, and the empowerment that came from that, and the ability to then let go and be forgiving, etc. It's this is everything is about perspective. Everything is about how we look at things, and just that change of perspective is incredibly powerful. So yes, I can see why that is something that really sticks in your mind, out of the teachings that you've received. How does this make the world a better place?
What it means is that all decisions, all choices include others. So, I did things in my youth that were a reflection of what I needed or wanted, but they didn't have any concern about other people or how they might be impacted. And today I know the difference. So the way the world becomes a better place is that a choice or a decision carries with it the ability to either consciously or subconsciously know the impact in such a way that it becomes harmless and helpful.
And what we're not saying is that this is about self-sacrifice or self-neglect, the whole martyrdom thing that we are kind of taught. It's almost like a distorted picture of what you're describing.
Indeed. And there's a simple way that I have learned to describe it. It's service to others, but not servitude.
Absolutely. And it's that it's about giving because we want to give. It's coming from the heart rather than
Right.
it being an obligation.
Right. And there's so many souls that have come in with the mission to help transform the reality, that when they set about to do that, they forget that they're human. They forget that they're in a human body and have human emotions. And there was a movie with Nicolas Cage, I think it was called City of Angels, where he as an angel fell in love with a human. And this woman was in the hospital or something and finally got better. And he petitioned to become human, which he did. And then the woman died. So it was like this unaware thing that we're not just serving ourselves, we're serving each other in ways that we might not even know. You know, like something simple like deviled eggs. You might have extra eggs in the house and think, I should cook some of these because I don't want them to go bad. So you cook them and they think, let's make deviled eggs. And then without knowing, a friend passes through town and stops in, and you say, well, can I offer you a meal? We've got these nice deviled eggs. Oh, well, those are my favorite. So that kind of intuition without even knowing on the surface, but there's an inner awareness that kind of lines you up. And this is the thing that has happened to me so much of my life, where I follow my guidance, and then there's this auspicious outcome that comes out of it. And that would be the second most important thing, is to learn how to connect with your higher self. And it's so important. I put it in all my books. And it's a simple protocol that I spent a number of years developing with my students. And the protocol requires 3 simple rules. And those 3 simple rules are: you do this practice, the specific practice, for 45 days. It's an easy practice. You asking unimportant, insignificant questions, and you create an awareness of yes, no, and neutral in your consciousness. You have to do a meditation first. Higher self, show me yes. Higher self, show me no, like that. And then you ask about unimportant stuff. So you ask about the food you might eat or the clothes you might wear. You might ask about what route to take or what train to take. And what's interesting is you don't get any you're not necessarily going to get any feedback, but you're willing to do whatever the guidance comes through. And then it is in hindsight that you see, oh, I asked about this restaurant. I didn't think the pizza place was going to serve me what I wanted, but turned out they have a salad bar. And I ran into a friend I've been looking for. So these auspicious events occur as a result of unimportant questions. So how do we make decisions? We make decisions by, reading on the web, talking to our friends. If we're going to buy a car, we test drive it. We go through these experiences to build a history. So when you spend 45 days asking about unimportant stuff and you have all these cool things happen, you now have a new history that proves unequivocally that your higher self is always right and that you can trust it. In fact, you don't trust it, you know it. And the difference between trusting and knowing is keeping an appointment is a trust, and knowing the sun comes up is a knowing. So that is like off the charts amazing, because what it does, even when you don't know why, you show up and you do what you're told to do.
That's absolutely beautiful, and a wonderful note on which to remind everyone that the book we are discussing is called Mastering Your 5D Self, Tools to Create a New Reality. Maureen, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. And I wish you and everyone who's listening a day of heaven on earth for yourselves, everyone you come in contact with, and everyone you're in contract with.
Beautiful. And now, likewise for you, of course. So,
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
if people want to find you, how do they do that?
My website is stgermainmysteryschool.com, STGERMAIN, mystery, MYSTERY, school, SCHOOL.com. Or if you just Google my name, MaureenSt.Germain.com, it'll come up as well. Um,
I'll be
and
putting it,
yeah, go
I'll be
ahead.
putting description box, as well as a link to the book. Maureen, thank you again.
Thank you so much. It's been a blast.
Yes, what fun. Missing objects. What's going on? Brilliant. That's wonderful inspiration. Thank you. And thank you all for watching. Next time, we're going to be talking some more about perspective. Until then, goodbye.